Oh, good morning. For a second there, I thought I had started a Twitch stream instead of just a recording. Nope. It is 9:20 a.m. on Sunday, January 12th, 2020. It is. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. That's how I start this. I was distracted because it is so warm outside right now that I literally have my windows open, and it's got to be almost 60 degrees. January in Boston. All right. Anyway, just in case anyone saw my Twitter post last night and was overly concerned about my finger, this is what I'm talking about. It's not a big deal. It's fine. I mean, it was gross. It bled a lot, but I'm not. I did not need to go to the hospital. Anyway, today is Sunday, so I'm continuing my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop with session 15, My Funny Valentine. This is one of my favorite episodes, although I say that about a lot of the episodes. But I think I've mentioned in the past during this rewatch that Faye Valentine I love all the characters, but she, for me, was one of the most influential characters because she was a big piece of the influences that went into Casey's character from Space Casey. And this episode in particular is one of the ones that is sort of most foundational about her personality and mindset, who she is, what's her deal, how did she come to be that way. And obviously that's going to be core when you start talking about being an influential character, right? So what do we know about Faye going into this episode, right? Like, obviously, she is kind of pathologically finds it difficult to trust people, right? She's certainly tough, but she also likes to be pampered. She has kind of a sense of romance, even at the same time that she's very selfish. So what we begin the episode with is some excellent paired imagery of seeing Faye be put into cryogenic sleep without knowing why or how she came to be there at that point. But we see her getting frozen, and then what do we cut to? Removing a bunch of frozen fish from a freezer. And apparently the crew of the Bebop is once again so poor they can't even buy food. Jet had this old shipment of fish that I guess he had gotten out of some previous case, but it's not only super old in frozen fish, but it's also full of poison. He has to tell Ed not to stop chewing on this big frozen full fish, for the reason that it's poisonous. And they need money any way they can, so he says they're going to go after this extremely small-time bounty con man who seduces and defrauds women. Says Spike won't like it. But, that's just really set up for the framing device, right? Because mostly what we're looking for here is Faye. Her entry into this story is that she's sleeping and apparently having a bad dream. She says, "You've got to be kidding me," or "You got to be kidding," I think is just the line in the English dub version, and it's great because of course she gets a couple of those in this episode, but the big one is the big reveal, right? The turn of the con, right? And so we can imagine later when she says that like looking back, that's probably what she was dreaming about, right? So Ein wakes her up because, one of the questions that perhaps could have been asked before now is, how do you take the dog out on a spaceship? Where do they do their business? Well, Ein is a very smart dog and certainly capable of learning to use a litter box type device, so apparently that's the solution. But he's the one that has to tell the others to empty it because he is a dog. He knows what needs to happen, but that does not give him thumbs. And so he wakes up Faye, basically persuades her that she, the solution to the smell of dog poop is that she needs to do something about it. And so he takes her, he follows her as she's grumbling and complaining. And let's see, she suggests that Ein reminds her of someone, and I think she says a man with thin eyebrows, although the animation, like they're blonde eyebrows. I don't know, thin eyebrows makes it like, it's maybe just a weird translation thing, just because, looking at the animated picture of this guy, I wouldn't call that thin, but they're certainly pale, right? They're light blonde. But the point is, for whatever reason, Faye thinks that Ein reminds her of him, and decides to tell him the story on the business that he's a dog and can't tell anybody else anyway, right? So, and it's another nice, just brief throwaway character beat that she has to present this whole thing as though she's doing Ein a favor by sharing this story with him. So you want to know about my past? And he yawns, and she says, "Okay then," and begins the story, right? So we see her being woken from cryogenic sleep. I like that it's not an immediate thing. Like, they show her really slow to recover and having to be treated by a doctor. And, for a while she doesn't even really move or talk or anything. She's very out of it. I think that's just a nice grounding detail, right? But so she's being woken up to the constant banal chatter of Dr. Bacchus, who's talking about the god Bacchus and his own past alcoholism. And it's the sort of thing that's like, well, it's not great bedside manner for a doctor. But he and his assistant, Miss Manley, are unfreezing her, making sure she's okay, and then explaining how she now owes them 300 million oolongs, which, that's a lot. We've established the basic economy of this sort of whole setting, right? Is like, that's a lot of money, right? Like the Bebop struggles over and over again to get bounties worth even just like 100 million oolongs, or like 1 million oolongs, I mean. And so 300 million. Yeah, so that's a lot. She's confused, though, disoriented, and at least in this scene, it would appear he's concerned. She shouldn't be. Why doesn't she remember that she's being unfrozen and should know all this? Although, when we learn later that it's all a con and that they're in on it, we understand that it may well be that, they wouldn't expect her to know that she owes this money, because she doesn't really. It's a con. It's a trick. Or she does, and like the details of the con are a little bit nebulous. Like, are they legit? She somehow actually does owe this money, or she doesn't. So it muddies the water a little bit in terms of what her debts actually are, because she later acts as though she really does have that much debt. But does she, though? Like, what is the nature of this con exactly? Well, maybe one explanation is that Dr. Bacchus and Miss Manley do actually work for this hospital, and can actually, therefore, officially, legally say that she owes them this money for unfreezing her. And that the con piece is really just Whitney's involvement and what he does and everything, that piece of it. That might be all of it, but it's left ambiguous, right? So let's keep talking about it. So she wakes up, she's confused. She is in this hospital, but now enter Whitney Haggis Matsumoto, the man with the thin eyebrows. And he comes in, and there's this slow roll discovery of hers that she's actually in what for her is the future. He explains, you were in an accident when you were 20, but that was 54 years ago. And there's a whole weird bit where she kind of points at various things and says, I know what these things are. It's a monitor and a cell phone and so on. And turns out that all of those things are just actually weird future machines that look like different things. Because sure, why not? Okay, whatever. But so he says he's her lawyer and he's going to help. So who knows what of any of that is true. But in any event, she's disbelieving. She can't believe it. What's going on? She tries to escape the hospital, but, she ends up, out in trouble. This is where she sees what she thinks is going to be a car. Turns out it's a spaceship. She's so disoriented. She needs help. And then he shows up again. He promises, I'll help you. We'll make the payments a little at a time, and I can take care of you. And so she begins to trust him, and then he starts the whole Sleeping Beauty routine. He's just super pampering her, fancy clothes, nice food, elaborate meals. Oh, it says, oh, you're my Sleeping Beauty. I have to help you, right? A prince has to help Sleeping Beauty. And it's all just like super romantic to the point of being super tropey and cliche, right? It's the sort of thing that we imagine our present Fae mocking as maudlin and naive and ridiculous fairy tale garbage, right? Because of course it is. And we see that, of course, what happens is he tries to make it seem like, oh, the debt collectors, they're after you. They must have gotten impatient. They're going to try to hurt you, but I'll buy time for you to get away. And at this point, she is escaping, believes that he's dead, told by the doctors at the hospital, gosh, what a nice guy. It looks like he set something up that just in case something happened to him, all of his money and all of his assets would go to you. Isn't that sweet? What a charming guy. And she's like, oh, my poor prince, lost. And what a generous man. Oh, he's taking care of me even after death. And then, so she thumbs the thing to accept all of his assets. It turns out they're all debts. And it's about $35 million woolongs. And so basically what we realize is the scam is he figures she has so much debt that there's no way she ever pays it all off anyway. So why not put 10% more on there if it makes him free and clear? And so the whole bit was a scam to trick her into accepting that debt, which honestly we could imagine being something that works over and over again, right? Like you wake people up, tell them that they have ridiculous amounts of debt. They're disoriented, like who knows, so that seems like that could be a scheme that you could do more than once. But this is, of course, where we get the big freeze frame. You've got to be kidding, throwing the table up. Great stuff, and just that big reveal. And I like too that despite how disoriented and how willing she was to take on the pampered, demure Princess Sleeping Beauty role and to believe the fairy tale, what we see is that once she sees that they're all debts, she gets it immediately. She understands immediately that it was all a con because she's smart. And so despite how willing she was to play that role, she gets it. She knows. Or she figures it out at least. And so when it's the debts, it's like, you see that moment of her kind of, like she thinks it's funny at first, but then she's realizing, yeah. And so it's great stuff. But then, of course, we flash back to the present. And it turns out that this super small-time con that Jet has gone after is, of course, Whitney Haggis Matsumoto, who now has had a fat implant. It's only been 3 years, which is a little bit surprising just because my sort of intuitive guess would be that Faye had been around in this setting for more than 3 years. She certainly picked up on things pretty quickly. But, it's fine. But in any event, he brings her in Oh, we should probably not ignore the nice bit where Faye finishes telling Ein the story, and they're in the hallway by the bathroom, and then Spike comes out of the bathroom, and so she realizes she has just inadvertently told Spike the whole story too, which she didn't want to do, and at that point, he was like, "How long were you in there? Too long. Your story needs editing." That's a good line, good bit. So in any event, Jet returns with the bounty. It's Haggis, Whitney, so at this point, she recognizes him. It's personal for her. She wants to talk to him alone. She needs to find out, like, what of what he said was true and what wasn't. And so at that point, he says, "Oh, the doctor was protecting me. I had my debts that I needed to take care of." And he had the whole bit of like, "Well, you had so much debt that like it seemed like it wasn't a big deal to give it to you, and it made a big difference for me." He seems regretful. He says the doctor's dead now. But then the police arrive, and Faye's not done talking to him yet. So she kidnaps him. And it's an excuse to give us like a little bit of space action in the episode, because Spike chases after in his ship. So in the meantime, they're running. The police are closing in. Tell me the truth, tell me what's really going on. What's true, what's not. And then the police are coming in saying, "Hand him over." But she recognizes that the police are actually Dr. Bacchus and Miss Manley, and so it's like, so you weren't even telling the truth a moment ago when you told me all of that. So what's true, what's not? And at that point, she learns Valentine is not even her original name. That it was given to her when they unfroze her, and she still doesn't know anything about herself. That actually reminds me, this jumps back to earlier in the episode, but there's such a nice little animation beat that has always stood out to me. Like when she has just run away from the hospital, and it's when Whitney is basically saying, "I know it seems bad, but it'll be okay." And she's kind of down on the ground, like on her hands and knees, and there's just this little moment where she's just saying, "And I don't even know anything about who I am," and she just does this little, like, she has to lift her hand to pound it again on the ground, but it's because it's supporting her, like she kind of tilts when she does it, and it's just a trivial little throwaway moment, but I don't know, it just always kind of stands out to me. It's just a very nice little animation grace note. Anyway, so now, like, what's the deal with the cops? Like, why is the doctor here? Why is he pretending to be the police? What is going on here? Are they all still working together, actually? Is that really, and they're trying to rescue him, but he insists he really doesn't know why the doctor's here? And it's like, but what's true, what's not? And then the real police show up and chase away the doctor. And at this point, she decides, "I'm turning him in. And so she's now claims the bounty. In custody, we get another nice little bit of, he says, "There is one true thing. I did fall in love with you while you were in cryogenic sleep. You were my sleeping beauty. But no, wait, no, that's not true. That's just another lie." And so, but was it another lie? And it's such a perfect little grace note to finish that whole thing on, where she ultimately has to decide to be satisfied with, she may just never know. The truth and the lies are so wrapped up in each other with that con, that the idea of what is the truth is probably, unfortunately for her, a fruitless question to ask. And she has to be at peace with that. But seeing him in prison, leaving, getting her share of the bounty, it seems like she is able to be a little bit more at peace with that part of her past. And that's nice. And then there's a nice little bit with her complaining. Her share of the bounty is just 19,800 wulongs. And it's like disappointing because it's like this guy who was loomed so large in her own personal history was such a tiny bounty, and then she's complaining at how little it is. And at that point, Jet is, explaining to Ein and Ed that is like, it's actually less than that. I accidentally added a 0. It's nice. And so we finished the episode on that note, and it's great. I think it feels so right to learn that, like, it just plays into everything we know about Faye, right? In terms of she wants that romantic fairy tale so bad that she was willing to buy into it and just accept it because it was what she wanted. But then it blew up in her face because, of course, it wasn't true. It wasn't real. But it was such a dramatic turn for her that it has just really scarred her personality. And so now she has a hard time believing that anyone could actually really care about her. And that's what leads to, some of the behavior we've seen in this series, which is, the whole bit about, I'm going to disable your ship and steal your money and then leave a note saying, "Oh, I had to leave. Don't come after me." Right? Like, it's so good. I love this show. It's so good. Anyway, next time, it's Jet's turn to get a little more backstory in the 16th episode, Black Dog Serenade. So I'll be back with that next Sunday, but in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.